Hey, and welcome back to Talos Principle, where we again have some mail. Let's show some threads. Oh yeah. Straton Fragment 13. I mean, Straton is definitely a word we've had before, just because of the philosopher in the base game, right? But like, otherwise, I don't think that this is something we had before, just because like the number 13, right? Like I can expect it. Something in here? But I guess it's just like something new to us, right? Otherwise, a small apology and submission still open. Let's start off with the fragment, I guess. Straton Fragment number 13 by Galatea. I've been digging through the files that Garrett unearthed in his latest escape attempt. Here's an interesting bit of text that I found by Alexandra Dranen's favorite philosopher, Straton of Sagaria. I still, to this point, I have no idea how to pronounce it. Sagara, I guess? It is neither necessary nor logical to denounce all virtues merely because one is confronted with the inevitability of one's own death. Beauty does not cease to exist because one is no longer beautiful. Lovers may die, but love itself cannot. The laws of the cosmos are not altered by the passing of generations. Knowledge may be lost, but not truth. When Eudoxus of Cnidos perished, the planets did not fall from the sky, nor did levers cease to work when Archetes breathed his last. If, then, we are truly dedicated to those virtues and not to our self-important ego, we can take comfort in knowing that all that we struggled for endures. Okay. Thinking about that before I continue to read, right? Yeah, okay. Base statements is basically just because something, right, like, I guess anti-nihilism, right? Like, just because you're going to end at some point and, like, everything is going to end, basically, that does not mean that it's not worth to still pursue, in this case, life or, like, doing things, basically, right? This is how I interpret that. Which, you know, valid, I guess. Right, like I'm only in this specific moment in time because, you know, I exist. Couldn't do that otherwise, and, you know, couldn't have played this game without existence, right? So there was probably at least like some worth for me myself, right? Like I don't know if like other people really care about that, but like, you know, to me that was worth it. Anyway, and also the whole idea that it doesn't really matter. Like, yeah, you can lose knowledge, but truth still holds, which I always think is like a really fascinating idea, especially like when it comes to, like, for example, social constructs, right? That sometimes get brought up, but like there are definitely things that are like really social, right? Like, or like again, like social, I guess, construct that we kind of made up that makes sense in this context of our society, like our values and stuff. But it aren't like necessarily 100% like truths in a way, right? Like that just basically means other people could, for example, still figure that one out, right? Like come to like a similar conclusion, but it's also quite likely that they could come to a different conclusion, right? Like this is like what that means. Like, for example, I'm gonna bring up an example where I would argue that it fits in both, and that is like, for example, math, right? Like math in itself is a truth of the cosmos. Right, like we have seen this time and time again, and like even if we lost all knowledge of math, a future generation could theoretically rediscover everything that we have already found. And actually goes even further, because like now we're talking about like the social thing. The social aspect of it, or like the social construct of it, is basically that we are using a base 10 system, right? Like this is not something like logical in the cosmos, it's just like how we represent it, right? Like there have been like other systems, right? Like base 12, for example, or like base 6 is like one that I've heard that's like really cool, because like one of the reasons why we use like base 10, like to my understanding at least, there might be like more important ones, it's just that we have like 10 digits, right? I have the weird feeling that this is also like where digits are coming from, right? Like linguistically speaking. But like we could also like count in base 6, where we basically say like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have like 6, which is like the new 10, right? It's like 10 now, and then we could continue counting like that, and then you could math it together, right? Like this is like 3 of those, so it's like 18, 21, right? Like holding both of them like this. Another really important one for us is obviously binary, just because like RPCs work like that, and like I forgot which sport used like binary as well, like to count, right? Like I've heard that this is the case. It was like handball or something like that when they like basically talk about like their plans. Basically, they hold like their hands behind their back, so like the opposing team can't see it, and you just say like, hey, this is like plan I don't know, plan 2 or something like that, right? I'm not gonna show like certain other things here, but right, because it's like really easy to count like in binary, and you can have like a lot of ideas represented by, you know, just using your hands, right? Like in the way you use them. And it's like really obvious, right? Like there are like other systems that I've heard about, like where you, for example, count basically like the parts of your finger, basically, where you have like 3, right? You have like the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then you have like 4 of those, so you can count to like 12. Technically 13, because you have like 13 states like that, because you can use your thumb like here, and like you have like the pinky finger as well, right? Like you have like 3 positions here to count, and you also have like not counting anything at all, right? Like, so you can represent like 13 things on like one hand. Still, right? Like all of those things are like basically how we as a society could decide to represent math, even though like the math behind it is like a truth that exists, right? Anyway, I don't know why I talked so much about this random thing, I guess. But yeah, like this is like why I'm saying like, yeah, the knowledge may be lost, right? Like base 10 may be lost at some point. It could be rediscovered, obviously, because like the bases are like as simple as a concept. But like mathematical knowledge, even if every single human died and then like we got like a new species here, 1 plus 1 would still be 2. Right, like, or like the representation, right? Like if you have like one thing and another thing, it's 2, even though it would be called differently. So yeah, like there's definitely that thing, this discovery. Now you could mention, or like you could definitely argue that then it's not really worth it to like rediscover it, because like still exists, right? Like why are you making that effort? But there's still like a lot of other knowledge that you can kind of create from those truths that wouldn't work otherwise. Anyway, and it's really interesting that there are like a lot of things that you discover. Again, with like knowledge, we luckily have become better at like archiving knowledge, but there have been like a lot of attempts like throughout history to like keep knowledge alive. And just because we have like now, I guess, a lot better data storage is probably the only way to describe it than they had before. But like even stuff like oral traditions, right? Yeah, it was like quite likely for them to get like something wrong, like comparatively to like something written down at least. But it was still passed down like the generation, and it kept, I guess, the knowledge was still like mostly correct, even with like this very, I'm gonna call it like faulty medium that it was like passed down on. And it's really interesting, like imagine discovering something and like this becomes like an oral tradition or like knowledge, I'm gonna call it. That gets passed down, and like whatever you discovered may save someone like in the future, right? Even just the knowledge of like some poisonous plants, like imagine, being the discoverer of that, and then like generations down the line somebody is still profiting from like your work, even if it's just like partially incorrect. Maybe they don't understand something like perfect. It doesn't actually matter that much. Let's continue. Thank you for posting this. Can you send me a copy of those files? Of course, I'll do so right away. Interesting that they actually have like access to those files in here still. I find it hard to maintain entirely so detached a point of view. QDRI is new. Wait a second. Oh wait, I do actually have the file open already. Definitely a new one. I should probably write down Spider as well, right? Like Spider we do know has disappeared. I've never written down those names. Spider's also here. QDRI. Huh, interesting. Oh yeah, and Spider we do know because they used to be a mod, right? Anyway. Where was I? I think it's hard to maintain entirely so detached a point of view, though I think the sentiment is excellent. Yeah, I also do agree. It's probably hard for most to be like perfectly detached, right? Like there are definitely some people who pretend to be like perfectly logical, but they sure aren't, right? Anyway, Straton is certainly an inspiration. He always makes me question myself and my point of view, which I believe is profoundly necessary. Yeah, I do definitely think it's really interesting how, like, just reading new ideas, it's like new, like some of them are like really old, can change your point of view so much. I'm gonna read like the last one before I finish my thought here. I realize I'm bumping a very old thread here, but I felt this question was relevant to our situation. Hope it helps. I think it's helped me. Okay, so this is how it works, right? Like we can only see threads once they pop up again, I guess. To be fair, like I would assume that in this game, like similar to like the base game, where I said that there's probably a lot more in the way of like texts out there that we could have learned about or like read in like the real version of this game, but we are playing like a game, right? Like this is like there to basically lead us the right direction, right? Like if we read about like things completely unrelated to the game, that would just lead to confusion more than anything else, right? Even though I do believe that like our game character, right, like if we really think about it like in a more complex way, would probably have like access to more data. And like same here, right? Like it's just like the posts are just limited so we don't get overwhelmed like in the beginning, but technically our character would have access to them if, you know, they wanted to. Anyway, the thing I want to talk about is like this, the idea also about like you know, things that make you question yourself, right? Like I've had like a lot of views in my past just because of like my upbringing, not like necessarily very bad things, but there are also like a lot of bad, like you know, less acceptable I guess thoughts that I had in the past, right? Or like positions, and like a lot of them were basically just challenged in the way that like somebody just brought it up, right? I had like a conversation with like a friend, like this is also quite some time ago, where we talked about, did I talk about this? Like it was like about basically about whether audiobooks count as books, basically, or like listening to an audiobook counts as reading a book. And this was like one of those things, right? Like I'm gonna be like very brief with like the explanation here why this is like a thing there. So like I in the beginning was like, okay, obviously these are like two different things, but there are like actually two things about that. First of all, this is like kind of this elitism in there, right? And I think this is like still like my main position that I still hold, like now that I changed my view on that, where there's like this weird belief that reading a book for some reason has like a certain value over like listening to it, which is also kind of ableist, right? That's like another thing, right? Like the ableism, in my opinion, is like maybe the smaller part to me personally, because I can read, right? And I don't think that the idea inherently comes from like an ableist perspective. It comes more from like an elitist perspective, where they believe that like the act of reading, like the physical reading of the letters, has like such a high value as opposed to like experiencing the story, which is actually what's being brought up. And the only reason why I even got confronted by that is because like somebody just brought it up basically, and I had like a chance to think about it. Because like if I don't get the chance to think about things, I don't even have to be like directly confronted about them. I think like getting directly confronted about like a lot of thoughts also leads to you being, or like not you personally maybe, but like in general people being more defensive and like kinda holding on to like their old beliefs. But like I was really lucky that like a lot of my beliefs were kinda challenged in situations where I didn't have to be defensive about them, right? And I got the chance to think about them and realize how wrong I was. Obviously this is like a gradual thing, right? Like you don't start like as a perfect human, and again, like upbringing can have a lot. It can, I guess, teach you a lot of wrong things. That's like one way to put it. And it takes like a long time. And I still believe that I hold probably a lot of, especially like outdated views, that I just haven't gotten a chance to get challenged yet, right? And maybe if I read more, then at some point I am going to be the perfect human. Okay, maybe not. But you know what I mean, right? Like, and I think it's really important to like at least read about like different sentiments, because if you or like read or hear about them, even if that means that you have to go outside of your like your bubble of comfort, is probably a way to put it. That's like really important to at least see them. Like you don't actually have to agree with everything, even if there are like sentiments of what's right and what is wrong, but you at least have to, give it a chance to challenge you, and maybe at some point you're going to agree, and maybe you're never going to agree. Right, but at least if you're never getting challenged, this is, by the way, the whole thing that I started like in the beginning of the DSC, where I said like how important it is to basically work to get challenged, to get like put into positions that are beyond like your again, like your comfort zone, basically, and like being forced to do something can also lead to like positive experiences because of that. Anyway, let's close out of here. Reread that one. Anyway, submissions are still open. It has an attachment. I don't know if I have the time for attachments. So let's start with the apology. A small apology. As a critic, I always believed that being as ruthless as possible was the only way to improve art. I thought clear criticism, unencumbered by politeness, was the best thing I could contribute to our society. After all, without that, how can artists grow? Criticism that minces its words is a waste of space, and I still think that's true. But as we approach the end, or transformation, of Gehenna, I wonder if I haven't been entirely too unkind. Have I reveled too much in my role as critic? Have I been sarcastic and crude when I thought I was witty? Was my defense of a proper grammar ultimately just an attempt to impose a sense of order on a world I couldn't control? Maybe. I don't know. But I do know I appreciated every work of art that I encountered. I didn't like all of them, that's true, but please understand that without them, I would have gone mad. Talking about your work, assessing its strengths and weaknesses, gave me something to hold on to. It gave me a purpose, a function in Gehenna. Every new story was like a little bit of salvation. For that I am more grateful than you will ever know, and I apologize if I ever cause any of you to feel less motivated to keep creating. That's actually a sweet message. One that I very much relate to. Like, I see myself, like, I say, like, as a critic, I like to criticize stuff. I feel like as a critic is, like, a bit too high for me, but, like, when, like, I mentioned this, like, when I play games, I like to think about, or, like, generally consume media. It's actually something I started in, basically around, like, the time COVID hit. Funnily enough, who would have thought, like, I had, like, a lot of time to like watch series and stuff, and read and all of that stuff. And I started just, okay, it actually goes like a little bit further. Basically, I did like watch sessions, right? Like I would watch like TV shows with like some friends, like online, right? We would just like have like Netflix open, like start the video at the same time so we could talk about stuff. And I realized something during that time, and that was basically that a sad friend who I spent like most of the time during that time with, like he would always recommend shows that I wouldn't really enjoy. That's like how I would put it, right? Like I would always think about like when I recommended a show that we would watch together, then I would try to find something that I think that they would enjoy more than what I would enjoy. Okay, obviously those would also be shows that I enjoyed, because like I wouldn't rewatch them if they were that terrible. But this is like something I noticed, and I noticed that I didn't actually know what I enjoyed. And that sounds like maybe a little bit weird, because like you generally know what you enjoy, right? Like if you enjoy something, you can say, hey, I like this or I didn't like that. But I couldn't put it into words what I enjoyed, and I couldn't really figure out like what I was looking for, like in a show, in a book, in a game, whatever. So I have like a OneNote document actually, where I just started to like write down everything I consume, like every piece of media basically, and just put in some notes about that. And it's a really fascinating transformation in there, because like the first few shows I watched, I would write like a few comments and I would write like a rough idea of like where I would rank them, right? Like just like I talked about this before, like I really hate like ranking stuff, but I gave it like a number between like 0 and 10 basically. And in the beginning I would like, if there was like a funny moment, I would just like write down, hey, this was like a funny moment, I remember this one. Basically after like an episode I would sometimes like add to this list. And like over time I became better and better to like really figure out like what it was, right? Like it wasn't just like small scenes that I would write down, but instead like real sentiments in like a story that made me figure out why I enjoyed them. And, you know, we're going back to like the whole thing, how I'm like kind of critical, how I'm actually using like a whole ranking system, right? Like I hate giving out 10 out of 10s because a 10 out of 10 to me means that there's like nothing to be improved. Which obviously is like kind of hard to do, which is like why I also really dislike using numbers these days. And instead of using numbers like these days, if I rank something, I use letters. Right, and even then I have like a rough description of what that means, right? Like what an S tier means to me, what an A tier means to me, and all that stuff. And I'm not even talking about like the quality. In those cases, I generally talk about like my enjoyment, because I think to talk about quality, you kind of have to talk, or like have to go way too deep into your piece of media, right? Like I think if you really want to critique something, like a really thorough critique where you're really ranking, hey, you're saying like this is like that and that great for each aspect of a game, again, piece of media, movie, whatever, then you would have to at least watch it like twice or 3 times, right? I don't think it's possible to really assess quality just by like briefly looking over it, especially with like longer games in this case, right? Like because we're mostly talking about games where I only get like the chance to experiencing them once, especially if it's like a big open world or something like that, right? Like I'm going to just play like a fraction of that. I feel like it would be I guess kind of arrogant of me to just like infer like the level of quality of like all the rest. There's obviously like a level where I would say like, hey, if you played like 90% of it, you probably have like experience enough. But like oftentimes I would not even do that, like especially for big games. Again, like smaller games, yeah, I'm fine with 100%ing them. And I feel like a little bit more confident about like talking about like the goods and the bads. But this is actually not where I'm going with that. One thing I always notice with that is like when I start critiquing games that like other people really enjoyed, they get really defensive about that. And a part of that might just be like me, right? Like I've been described as like an aggressive German for some reason. But like generally, I try to critique the piece of media, not the people who enjoy it. And I genuinely think that there are a lot of ways to improve, especially games, because games are not just pieces of art, they're also like products. And especially as a product, I think, I guess, reaching its truest potential would be great. Obviously, no developer's going to listen to me, right? Like, I'm not, I don't have that kind of reach. But still, and I really find it fascinating, the discussions that come up with that constantly, where I would like bring up like arguments why I think that something doesn't work, for example, and people would just come with like, oh, but people are free to enjoy whatever they want. But like, this is not what it's about, right? You are always free to enjoy whatever you want. This is like, again, something I'm gonna bring up again, where I say liking something and something being good are still 2 different things. Right? And I definitely have loved, I guess, flawed pieces of media. And that's fine. That doesn't mean that they are not flawed. And I don't think that there are any, if at all, right, like pieces of media, maybe there are like a very few that are basically perfect. And this is like why, to go back to this again, this is why I don't like giving out like 10 out of 10s. Because I genuinely don't believe that exists. Anyway, but like, this also means when you're critiquing like that, especially like in a stream/YouTube setting or video setting, that you are in this weird position of authority because like people are currently listening to you, which probably is like part of why these critiques seem like personal attacks in a way, and I'm aware of that. But yeah, like none of these critiques were ever about like saying that like something is first of all terrible and like the developer should feel ashamed about that most of the time, except like AAA developers, you can feel ashamed. Right, like not singular ones, but like as a whole. But like especially with like indie games and stuff. But also if you enjoy something and I critique it, feel free to still enjoy it, right? Like I'm not criticizing you. It's just like the way I like to think about it. And the thing about critiquing stuff is you're generally going to talk about like negatives a lot more than positives, because like if something works, then you don't really have to talk about it, right? That's the next thing. So like I definitely get like the sentiment of like Frankenstein here. Anyway, Mac, I will never forget your devastating deconstruction of episode 24, but I do think it helped me, in the long run, to be a better writer. Your feedback for each issue of Incredible Stories was greatly appreciated. Hey, the mean reviews were the best. So 6 out of 10? 6 out of 10. But yeah. Anyway, sweet apology, I guess. In any case, I think I'm kind of worried that this with the attachment is going to be like a little bit longer. Do I have like the time? You know what? Let's make this a longer episode of this. Submission is still open. Now, I'm kind of worried about that, and it might be like too long. If it's too long, then I don't know. It's going to be a very long episode. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but all this craziness recently makes me want to write more than ever. Just a reminder that provided your status is high enough, you can still submit original works for review. And I, for one, will still be reading, even if you've never made anything before. In fact, especially if you haven't, now's the time. Don't forget Lilith and Mr. Mosebar developed a tutorial to help. A tutorial to write? Okay, sure. Loading attachment. A connecting to foreign module established. Welcome to the story creation tool. Since this is your first project, this tutorial will help guide you through the process. According to ISBN 10-022, I don't know if this is ASCII or something else. ISBN 10 is kind of quite a low number for the ISBN, right? All stories begin with the characters of one kind or another. Therefore, to finish a story, you simply need to understand your characters, and the plot will proceed logically from there. This season's theme is Bildungsroman. Okay, fair enough. Is ISBN... That's an international one, right? I want to say, like, this is not a German one. But yeah, just to translate this, like, Bildungsroman is like a... Okay, Bildung is from, like, education. Roman is a novel. So I'm really confused about that, but hey, sure, let's begin. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Close your eyes. I'm not gonna close my eyes. You see before you a human of remarkable qualities. Is it a boy, a girl, or someone else? I feel like in this world it would be someone else, right? Like they don't really, You know what? Maybe it should be a cat. Good. A character's sex helps determine the sorts of challenges and opportunities they might encounter in your story, as well as how other characters will perceive them. Now imagine your characters a little older and experiencing real triumph for the first time. What are they doing? Demonstrating startling physical prowess, succeeding in an intellectual challenge. Something these ancient ideas fail to capture. Everything better than everyone else, all the time. I mean, I'm not really into power fantasies, I have to say. Something the ancient ideas fail to capture. Okay, let me think about like a story. It's probably the story about like a character who is currently definitely not called like Uriel Copy or anything, who is trying to save the world of not Gehenna. Let's say Gehenna. Gehenna is a great place, right? So they are, I would say, succeeding in an intellectual challenge. Sure. Understood. Your character's natural aptitude is determined by the sum of their genetic and experimental influences. What sort of upbringing did your character have? Wealthy and nurturing, wealthy but uncaring, poor and uncaring, poor but nurturing. You know what? This feels like creating a character in D&D and like using like one of those questionnaires to help you out. I would argue, are we wealthy? Wealthy but uncaring. Like, our upbringing is going to be, hey, we kind of spawned into this world and we had Elohim around us, right? And Elohim seemed to kind of care that we succeeded, as well as, the messengers that, also decided that we should get some help in our world. So I definitely would say that they were caring, right? Or nurturing. Are we wealthy? Now, we were actually poor because we didn't actually have all the equipment in the beginning. We had to work for that. Right? So we were poor but nurturing. According to extensive studies of the genre of ancient records, social advantage is generally sufficient to offset genetic disadvantage. Genetic advantage will only sometimes offset social disadvantage. Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Did we talk about like the idea that like I think we probably mentioned this like at least once, right? Like IQ being like still a terrible measurement of intelligence, by the way, but it's like one that exists. How oftentimes, right, like there's like this very racist belief that like there are certain races that are smarter than others. And weirdly enough, once you take like someone from a very let's for example this somewhere in Africa and bring them into like the Western world, and like their kids, even though they still share like those genetics, tend to do like a lot better in IQ tests, because they for some reason tend to target academic ability, which is trained in like those societies, right? Like, so if you give like the people the means and the wealth to develop, this has like a massive change on that, right? And there doesn't seem to be as massive of a genetic difference in there. That seems to be like a lot more societal. And again, like wealth inequality tends to be like the biggest determining factor when it comes to, again, measurements like IQ. Again, IQ not really the best way to measure intelligence, because like nobody can agree on what intelligence even is. It's just one measurement. Anyway, in other words, your character's background will have a radical effect on how they think about themselves and the nature of the problems they face in life. Are you sure you want your character to have that kind of background? Sure. Great. Now imagine your character has reached adulthood. 87.2327% of Bildungsroman records commence with an emotional blow for your protagonist. Like, I'm gonna be also completely honest, like, I don't think I've ever heard that word Bildungsroman in my life. So, this is like the fascinating thing. I guess they talk about like more of a youth novel kind of thing. Like, even German has like different dialects, so maybe this is like something common somewhere else. I don't know. What will your character suffer? Obviously the death of the parents, right? Death of the family, first option. A personal injury, an unplanned death, an unplanned planned pregnancy. My protagonist goes by unharmed. I mean, if we're still telling the story of ourselves in a way, right? Like, I would say the protagonist did go unharmed. It's not like we lost the abilities ever, right? Like, and we don't really get... No, wait. Personal injury. We were blown up multiple times. Thank you. This is sounding dramatic already. A character is like an equation. Settle on the opening premises and the conclusion will work itself out. Displaying opening premises. Non-specific sex. Intellectually gifted. Low wealth background. Caring family. Suffered a serious injury. Ready to generate story? Sure. Please stand by. Locking story premises done. Generating outcomes done. Displaying your first draft. To begin my life with the beginning of my... Wait. To begin my life with the beginning of my life, I was born at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. Isn't that the joke that you start a story at the very beginning? Fiscally deprived childhood. My father, as he is always careful to point out, is only able to report the midwife's account, seeing how he was pulling a long shift at the nearby textiles mill to pay for a second-hand cot. You know, I can't even afford a working camera, apparently. So we completely relate to each other, right? Esoteric sex. My childhood was, in retrospect, a difficult period. I found that although my fellows all had a wide variety of different physical appearances and appendages, fair enough, with varying levels of function, they nonetheless identified a resemblance and bond between themselves, which was to my eyes all but invisible. My parents, aware of my particular situation, had the good foresight to provide me with a name ambiguous in matters of sex, and I have continued in that vein ever since. My story became worthy of note as I approached the age of 18. Dang. Your character suffers a personal injury. It is true that people are sculpted both by their nature and by what befalls them, and in my case it may be more true than most. The person that I am today is defined by what has been taken away from the person I was. I lost my left leg in a fairground accident. Oh no, the Ferris wheel unexpectedly reversed and was snapped between my carriage and the platform's edge. Not great, but hey, sure, we did suffer something. And I mentioned this before, like this kind of reminded me of like some D&D questionnaires, but now that I think about it, this is literally just what backstory is, right? Like they provide like some prompts and then you can kind of work from there. And depending on like how serious you take that, you can make some very complex stories, even like based off like some very, I guess, basic prompts, because like oftentimes, like for example in this case, right, like I don't know if it's going to come up, but like imagine we're talking about just this event, like that you're missing a leg, right? Like let's say this is the prompt. Okay, how do you miss this leg? Like why are you missing this leg? Okay, you lost your left leg in a fairground accident. That's like interesting. Okay, what does that mean for your character? Well, first of all, you're one-legged, right? So there are probably some stories that you can bring about, like either you wanna have a character who just runs around one-legged, or maybe they have like a prosthesis or something like that, and you can go like that direction. But you also have like some other interesting things that come from like the answers you've already given in those stories, right? Like we talked about like the fairground accident. Maybe your character is now afraid of Ferris wheels. That would be interesting, right? In a way. I don't know how often Ferris wheels come up in stories, but like, you know, you could certainly write something about that. But hey, maybe the prompt is going to do that. A person of few means. At that time, in that place, it wasn't a death sentence to receive such an injury, but it was a serious impediment. Owing to some legal wrangling between the fair owners and the state, I found that no party was terribly willing to cover my surgical expenses, let alone the cost of a fully functional prosthetic. Over time, I learned to be quite proficient at balancing on one leg and resolved to find a way to support myself both financially as well as physically. Look at that, they're bringing it up. I worked for a time doing various kinds of performance on the street, but soon the more seasoned cripples learned to outdo my tricks, and I was edged out of the competition. My story ran downhill from there. I will not tell you from where I write these words for fear of permanently scarring you. Oh no, getting dark, I guess. Though I have by every measure failed in life thus far, I am convinced my tale holds an important lesson. Be fit for purpose, accept your place. We are owned by others from the moment we first take breath to long after we die. Make of it whatever you can. I certainly did not. The end. Would you like to publish your draft on the billboard for a review? I feel like I could start from scratch, but like, here's the thing. I think this would be, okay, like obviously like a little bit more nicely written, but like imagine a book that starts like that, right? Like maybe it has like some purpose. Like my creativity is flowing in this last section, right? Like saying, hey, this is actually over, but like this is actually where the story starts. I think you could write like a very interesting story based like on the last passage here. Right, like someone convinced that they should be like the negative example for something. I think you could do something, but hey, let's publish. All the posts to billboard, done. Remember to check the relevant billboard thread in the future to see how your story was received by others. Well, I am curious about that. Well, let's say, okay, congratulations! For sharing your first creative work in Gehenna, your profile status has increased from 8 Master to 9 Visionary. Ooh. Restricted billboard threads have been unlocked. Oh no, more reading! A short Bildungsroman by Urinal Copy. Well, that is lovely, but I guess we're going to figure out what that means and like how people are going to react to that in the near future. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the episode and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. I'll be seeing you next time. Till then, have a good one and bye-bye.